My name is Jennifer Turliuk, and I'm the CEO of Maker Kids. We're the first and largest makerspace for kids in the world. And today I'm going to talk to you about innovating ourselves and how to raise our kids as innovators. So on the agenda for my talk, I'm going to talk about 4 things. First, the problems that we face as a society. Second, how we can innovate ourselves to work on solving those problems. Third, how we can innovate the world through something called making. And finally, how to raise our kids as innovators. So let's start with the problems. At the Singularity University program at NASA, we group them into these 8 areas: global health, water, energy, environment, food, education, security, and poverty. How are we going to solve these pressing issues? Well, through innovation, of course. I like to start with definitions, and the definition of innovation is a new or better way of doing valued things. So how are we doing at that? Well, we're doing a great job at innovating technology. The Google self-driving car is a great example of that. I mean, I was kind of hoping for a flying car at this point, but the Google self-driving car is pretty great as well. But as much as we've been doing a lot of innovating in technology with self-driving cars, 3D printing, etc., I would like to argue that we haven't been doing a good job of innovating ourselves. And what do I mean by that? Well, over the years, our brain has expanded, and each expansion has taken hundreds of thousands of years. But in the last 20 years, since the internet came about, there's been an explosion of technology, and our brains have not had the chance to expand to keep up. I remember when I got my first 32 megabyte USB key, and I thought that was a lot of storage. But now tiny devices have expanded to be able to store thousands of gigabytes of data, and our brains have simply not kept up. And there's a whole host of associated problems with this. 80% of people are unhappy with their jobs in America, and the statistics are similar around the world. And 20% are downright hostile to their employers. I'm sure that's none of us in this room, though, of course. We are #overwhelmed. And what I mean by that is there's so many incoming inputs and signals that it's hard to even think straight. I don't know if you've ever had a day where you just spent the day reacting and responding to email as it came in. I know I have, but that's not necessarily the best way to be innovative, is it? It's easy to just become reactive and become consumers of information and technology and to let our kids do the same. Did you know that the Ontario sex education curriculum did not change between the years of 1998 and 2015? That's 17 years. Is that really how we want to educate our kids? We're still partnering in the same way, but 50% of marriages are ending in divorce. Is it till Tinder do us part? We're living in separate houses, but we're lonely in them. We're home alone. And when we're out, we're alone together. Every time I go on a subway or a train, I see about 90% of the people engaged in their smartphone. Even though this has been happening for a number of years, it still continues to shock me and make me wonder, have we innovated ourselves for the better or for the worse? We are Google searching for ourselves. I wrote this article for Forbes, and the editors titled it, "How I Figured Out What to Do with My Life." It's now had over 1 million views, and after some research, I realized that this was because a number of people, well, a lot of people, are Google searching the term, "what to do with my life." And studies have shown that many people are turning to Google for life's big questions before or even instead of turning to their friends or loved ones. So it's no wonder that 1 in 4 people have mental health diagnoses, a rate higher than ever before. And while I'm not saying that mental health diagnoses are inherently bad, in fact, autism has been shown to be a great way to focus in and at the exclusion of all those technology signals that are coming in, it can be difficult for people living with mental health diagnoses. So how do we increase human potential in order to solve those pressing problems that I outlined, such as poverty and health? Well, by innovating ourselves. And it's been said that if you want to change the world, you need to change yourself first. So I'm going to talk about how I changed myself, how I innovated myself, and some ideas for how you can innovate yourself. This is me at graduation on the left from university. As you can probably tell, I was a precocious young university graduate. and I landed in the heart of one of the biggest corporations. And I quickly found myself very dissatisfied, and I wasn't sure what to do next. So I knew I needed to innovate myself in order to figure out what I wanted to do next, and in order to become good at that. So as anyone would do, I quit my job and flew to California. I knew that I might be interested in startups, Silicon Valley, Google, and Stanford, so I went down there to check it out. And one of the most important conversations I had when I was there was with a man named John Crumbolts. He's a career counselor at Stanford who career counsels career counselors how to career counsel. Pretty meta, right? So I said, hey, John, I'm not really sure what to do with my life. Maybe you can help me. And he suggested that I prototype my life. Now, what do I mean by that? He said that I should try each of the things that I was interested in a small way, as minimal commitment as possible, so I could figure out which of them I was most interested in and then deepen my commitment in them. So I embarked on a self-education journey, and I would argue that self-education is the most important type of education of all. I started cold emailing hundreds of people in Silicon Valley who I was interested in meeting with, and I was surprised that many of them responded to me and were willing to. I was just a university grad at the time, but something must have sparked with them that they were willing to meet with me. So I actually managed to meet with the founders of Airbnb, Peter Thiel of PayPal, founders of Square. I shadowed at Kiva, at the Stanford Design School, and visited places like Google and IDEO. And through this, started prototyping my career and figuring out what I wanted to do next. And through that process, I managed to come to what I'm doing today. And I believe that a great career consists of what you like to do, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what will make money. And you can prototype your life, too. You don't need to quit your job in order to do so, but you can do this process of identifying what you might be interested in, trying it out in small ways, and then deepening your commitment in the ones that you like best to determine what your next role will be, what your next extracurricular will be, or even what your next neighborhood will be. And there's examples of how people are innovating different areas of their personal lives that I'm going to share with you. So innovating housing, there's a great thing called co-housing, and I lived in a co-op with Stanford students and alumni when I was living down in California. And we shared chores, we raised chickens, we ate meals together. And upon further research, I realized that in Denmark, the happiest country in the world, according to a number of surveys, they actually have one of the highest rates of co-housing. And that means basically a group of 20 families living in an apartment building. They each have their own apartment, but they share chores, they make meals, and then they eat together. It saves families an average of 1 to 2 hours per day, and the kids have friends beyond just school. And these are popping up in more and more places like Vancouver and New York. A great example of innovating culture is Startup Chile. So Chile realized a few years ago that they were quite dependent on mining and wine, and they wanted to get more into entrepreneurship, but many young Chileans were quite risk-averse. While most governments in a situation like that might choose to make a technology park, which costs millions of dollars, Chile took a different approach. They offered up 40 grand to selected foreign entrepreneurs to go live and work there for 6 months in exchange for mentoring and giving talks to Chileans. And the program has been quite successful. Over a period of only months since it started with a lot of foreign entrepreneurs attending the meetups and no Chileans. And then only a few months later, there were lots of Chileans at the meetups. They were all in Spanish, and a lot of Chileans were choosing to start their own company. It's also put Chile on the map. It's been in The Economist, CNN, and many people are now choosing Chile as a place for entrepreneurship. You can innovate attitudes through travel. Indonesia is a great place, and women there spend, on average, in certain parts of it, 2/3 of their waking lives preparing for, executing, or cleaning up from religious ceremonies. So you can imagine how coming back from a place like that can vastly change your attitude. You can innovate your mind through meditation. Meditation has been shown to boost happiness, and although some people think, oh, it's such a complicated thing, really it just involves quieting your mind, and it's a great way to put distractions aside and focus in on coming up with innovative ideas. You can also innovate against distraction through something called a digital detox. So as it might sound, this involves putting your technology away for a couple of hours or a couple of days at a time. And there's actually summer camps for adults now where you can check your phone at the door and go play capture the flag. It's really fun. A great way to innovate our goals is through something called mastermind groups. So this is getting together a group of like-minded folks to discuss your goals and progress. There's a number of these in Toronto that you can join. I'm part of one, and I really love it. And the program that I was talking about before, Singularity University, is a great example of how you can innovate your education even beyond university. They have executive education programs that are 5 days in length, and they update their curriculum every year, teaching things like 3D printing and robotics, and how to apply those emerging technologies to areas like health and education. And there's lots of other executive programs that are awesome. And you can innovate your thoughts through something called journaling. So you might be thinking, hey, journaling, that's pretty antiquated. Why don't I just use technology? But it's actually been proven to be a great way to put aside distractions and literally write the course of your life. Through my journey, I happened upon something called making that I really like, and I'm going to talk about how to innovate the world through making. So there's this thing happening called the maker movement. It's a cultural renaissance where more and more people are turning back to things like sewing and building things with their hands, and they're leading revolutions such as 3D printing. They're sharing their plans through things like Make Magazine and Instructables, and there's a bunch of companies in this area that prove how popular it's been. So Etsy has over 1 million artisans on its platform and made over $1 billion in revenue recently. And Kickstarter, which we've all heard of, allows anyone to launch their own idea. And these makers are gathering together in communities. Maker fairs are events where over hundreds of thousands of people gather together to share their plans and ideas. And maker spaces, which I'll talk more about, are places where adults come together and share things like 3D printers that they might not be able to buy on their own. When I went to my first maker fair, I was able to take a workshop where I built this microcontroller. I was amazed. I'm not an engineer, but I was able to build this. It's similar to the Arduino, which was a microcontroller that was used to prototype the Pebble smartwatch and the Square card reader. And so this is a great way of how you can innovate electronics to change the world. Then I got into 3D printing. It's a great way to innovate objects. So I downloaded the files for these earrings, and a few minutes later, I had them 3D printed. And from there, I moved on to designing a few of my own 3D files and modifying existing ones. And this is a 3D scan of me that was then 3D printed. I believe this is probably going to be the next generation of selfies. And then one of my friends at one of the maker spaces said, hey, why don't we 3D print a 3D printer using 3D printed parts? And my mind was just blown. Again, I'm not an engineer, but using the limited electronics and 3D printing knowledge that I'd gathered, I was able to help him print this 3D printer, and it was then featured in a music video. And that was a really awesome, transformative experience for me, realizing that, hey, I can make things that other people can use. And I think this experience is reflected really well in this quote from the Steve Jobs movie, which is, when you grow up, you tend to get told the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world. Try not to bash into the walls too much. Try to have a nice family, have fun, and save a little money. But that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader when you discover one simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it, you can influence it, you could build your own things that other people can use. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. So along this journey, I realized, hey, that would have been a really cool experience to have as a kid, and I wonder how that might have altered the course of my life. And then I realized that what I wanted to do was innovate learning for the next generation so they could have these experiences and see how that might alter their lives. So now I'm going to talk about how to raise kids as innovators and educate the iPad generation. So why is this important? Well, small changes in childhood can have a huge impact on the trajectory of your life. It's like a golf swing, where if you make a small millimeter change at the outset of your shot, it can vastly impact where the shot ends up. And In my opinion, it's only limited use trying to change adults, because we're very formed in our opinions and judgments, but children are so much easier to change, so I've chosen to focus my career on that. How can we get more people like these, founders of Google, Amazon, and Wikipedia? Well, it turns out that all these people on the screen have something in common in their educational background, and I'd like you to take a moment to think about what that is. You're probably thinking that they all went to an Ivy League university and graduated from it. Well, that's actually not the case. What they all have in common is they all went to something called Montessori. What's Montessori? We may have heard of it, but let's take a look at what it actually is. So it's a school system for young children, and they have multi-age classrooms, self-directed learning, and discovery for long blocks of time. There's collaborative learning, no grades or tests, and a focus on math, language, music, and art. This is an example of a Montessori classroom. They call it a prepared environment, and it has all sorts of stimulating things for kids to try. The way the instructor there is interacting with the kids shows how they normally do, which is getting right in there and exploring with the kids. And these are some of the tools and materials that are used at Montessori. And Montessori has been quite successful. Supporters include Edison, Wozniak, Ericsson, and Bell. And the founders of Google have actually credited going to Montessori with their success. Larry Page, one of the founders, said, "I think it was part of that training of not following rules and orders and being self-motivated, questioning what's going on in the world, and doing things a little differently." So it's no wonder that by age 5, Montessori students have higher performance in reading, math, and executive function. But as we move from learning with our ears and our eyes to learning with our hands and our whole bodies, as we move from being consumers to creators, I would argue that there's a need for more technology in the classroom. But there's still some barriers to kids becoming innovators. Many of the options for learning technology are basic and step-by-step, like building this spice rack. Hacker spaces or maker spaces, the places what I was talking about, are mainly for adults. They don't have the supervision and mentoring set up for kids. And finally, if you're a family then who can't get access to a 3D printer, you're left with the option of buying your own. Although the price is coming down, they are still quite expensive. So for all these reasons and more, Maker Kids was born. Maker Kids is like Montessori for the 21st century. It involves self-directed learning and discovery and collaborative learning, just like Montessori. We're the first and largest makerspace for kids in the world, and we're located in Toronto, and we're starting to open more satellite locations. And the CEOs of Arduino, the microcontroller that I was talking about, and Maker Media, which runs Maker Faire and Make Magazine, are on our board of advisors. So we run programs, camps, and parties for kids on technology, and we've done curriculum development for clients like Intel and educator training for clients like the Toronto Catholic District School Board. This is an example of our prepared environment. It's our makerspace with a wall there that we call the wall of discovery and discovering possibilities. And right there is an example of how our instructors interact with kids, which is also right in there interacting and exploring with the kids. And these are some of the tools and materials that we use, including 3D printers, microcontrollers, and electronics. Here's another look inside. So we've got laptops, all sorts of tools, 3D printers, and electronics lab for kids to use. And we run camps, programs, and parties on 6 topics, which we've selected as ones that can help kids be innovators. So I'm going to talk about those now. Video game programming is a program where kids are able to learn to make a video game and learn to code using a drag-and-drop environment called Scratch, which is a great way for them to learn to code. Electronics is a program where kids can do things like plug an LED light into an orange and watch how it lights up from that. Robotic Inventions uses the microcontroller called Arduino that I was talking about before and shows kids how to light up lights and make motors spin by coding it. And then Minecraft is a very popular video game that some of you may have heard of or even told your kids to stop using late at night. And we have an advanced Minecraft program which harnesses their interest in Minecraft and teaches them 3D design skills and how to be a good netizen online. Toy hacking is a program where kids take apart toys and then put them back together to form new toys. And 3D printing allows kids to expand their 3D design skills and then 3D print an object of their own. And finally, remote control robotics allows them to make a robot that they can drive around. So we've been really happy to realize that kids love to make things. We've had thousands of kids come to our makerspace. And I love this quote from a mom who tweeted, "2 maker kids this afternoon. Daughter says, 'I'm more excited than Christmas. I've been looking forward to this my whole life.'" Pretty cool to be compared to that, right? And then afterwards she tweeted, "And it was as great as she imagined it would be. Thanks again." We've also been really blessed to have a lot of kids coming that have mental health diagnoses, and the parents have told us that they're using it as a form of high-tech arts therapy where the kids feel better during and after the programs. And I believe this is happening for a number of reasons. First of all, behavior. When they're making things, they're often behaving quite well because they're having fun, and then they take that improved behavior with them back to school and their home. Second, social skills. Making is a social activity where you're getting advice from other people. So while kids are so engaged in something like Minecraft, they often take social risks, such as talking to adults for the first time in a few years, as we had an experience with, because they wanted to get some tips on Minecraft. They're also able to feel power over the world when they make something that other people can use, kind of like when I made that 3D printer. And it's a great way for self-expression, much like painting. But it's also a great way to be recognized for being creative. One of our volunteers said, "I didn't really think I was creative because I'm not very good at art or music, but I recently realized that I am creative because I'm creative at engineering." And you may have noticed that what I'm doing now directly ties into what I did during my self-education program. So when I was shadowing at the Stanford Design School, I helped them build this graphic here of all the different things they have in their proto bins, they call them, with lots of art supplies, etc. And now we have bins much like that at Maker Kids. So it shows how self-education can lead to your career and can lead to the education of others. This microcontroller here says on the back, I don't know if you can see it, but it says the world is a construction kit, and I agree. So what I'd like to ask you is, what will you learn? What will you make? We need heroes who can solve the pressing problems that I mentioned, like poverty, water, and environment. And you can be that hero, starting with innovating yourself. You can make a dent in the universe. What sort of dent will you make? So now that we've outlined that you can make a difference, I'd like to ask you, will you? Will you take one of these slips here that says, "I will"? So I encourage you to make something cool every day, and thanks very much for having me.